Startups begin in communities across the country.
Why does Silicon Valley get so much credit? My name is Nick Kastner.
And I'm Caitlin Clays. We're interviewing the people building startup communities across America.
But in the areas no one is talking about, the middle.
This is the Ecosystem Builder Podcast by mug.news.
This is the Ecosystem Builder Podcast. Ecosystem building is a subset of economic development that focuses on fostering entrepreneurial activity in a community. For this episode, we are chatting with Katie Silversmith. Katie is an ecosystem builder in St. Louis, Missouri, as the co-founder of Thrive Coworking. Katie, thank you for joining the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Nick. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, yeah, of course. So to kind of start with, how did you first get involved in St. Louis's startup community?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I own a co-working space, Thrive Co. And I've been in the co-working world for about 5.5 years. My first venture into this world was I was the director of another space and helped it from when it was founded until it grew to full capacity. And it was all for wellness professionals. I'm actually a social worker. So I have a background in clinical social work, and but I really enjoyed working with new business owners. In that case, it was therapists mainly to help them launch their businesses and grow and be successful. And so shortly after, or not shortly after, I was there for a couple of years, and then I transitioned into, my husband and I decided to start a co-working space of our own that wasn't industry specific, but that worked with small businesses and startups and gave them access to the things that they needed to be successful. So we're a co-working space, but we kind of have an incubator feel in a way, just because we serve as kind of a one-stop shop for entrepreneurs to have access to literally anything they need to be able to grow their business and be successful. And we opened in January 2019. So we're almost 2.5 years old.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Katie, what's one thing about the St. Louis startup scene that someone who I like myself, I haven't spent much time in St. Louis. What's something I wouldn't know about about St. Louis's startup community without having been there?
Okay, so I think the most magical thing about St. Louis is the fact that people are so willing to help one another. So it's very flat in a way, like the ecosystem, the startup ecosystem. It's very easy to talk to other startup founders or to talk to CEOs of corporations, or people are really, it's a kind of a family feel here. And there's such a willingness to help people and help them be successful, which I don't think you'd see in a bigger city like New York City or something. There's probably, 100 layers between, like, oh my gosh, I can't think of the word.
Like the hierarchy.
Yeah,
of business.
hierarchy.
Yeah,
yes. I haven't had my coffee this morning, but so yeah, there's so many layers to getting to, people that you want to talk to. And here it's just not like that. It's just really laid back, and there's such a interest in helping locally owned businesses and startups be successful. So
yes, yeah, it's very very much like Midwestern vibe,
yes,
if you will.
Totally. Yes.
Yes. And so as someone who started a business within St. Louis, what is the access to like interest-free loans or grants or any financing like that to kind of get started?
Yeah. I don't know comparatively to other cities, because this is where I've lived most of my life, but
of course,
it seems like there's a really vibrant funding landscape here. It seems pretty good. So part of our model is that in trying to give entrepreneurs access to things they need to be successful, we have a lot of relationship with funders at different levels, depending on the type of business or the stage of business that they're in. And I would say that it just seems like, I don't know, people, again, back to that willingness to help. I feel like this ecosystem here is just so supportive. There's just so many resources available, and it's such a great place to start a business. So we have a lot of accelerators in town. And again, I don't know comparatively to other cities, but it feels like we have a ton of them compared to the population here. There's a lot of venture capital. There's a lot of banks willing to help out. We have the St. Louis Economic Development Partnership, which helps out and has a lot of different funding options available. I mean, it's just a great place to start a business.
Yeah. So Katie, as someone who talks to a bunch of ecosystem builders and community leaders across the Midwest, that is not most people's answer. So I can assure you, like most answer is, oh, like we're working on it. But the fact that it's well established in St. Louis is insightful to hear.
Yeah.
So then, like, yes, yeah. The next topic we like tend to go into is getting a feel for where entrepreneurs hang out at in the city, if we can kind of come at it through the lens of like a post-COVID world, that of course, like co-working spaces and coffee shops have looked very different over the past 18 months. But what are some of those like coffee shops or breweries or bars that entrepreneurs tend to hang out in St. Louis?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm biased because I own a co-working space. I would say that co-working spaces are where it's at for entrepreneurs in St. Louis. We have a really cool network of spaces here. And I don't have anything to compare it to in other cities, but what I love about our spaces here is that every single one has a completely different vibe and a niche in the market. And so there's really a place for everyone. It's a really supportive and family-like community here of other spaces and space owners. And so I would say a lot is happening inside co-working spaces, to be completely honest. I also think we have Venture Cafe here in St. Louis, and that's a place where a ton of entrepreneurs come together and right now virtually, but hopefully, in person soon. But that's where entrepreneurs really come together to attend trainings and network and find partners for their startups and just communicate and collaborate. So there's a lot of energy there. I'm also part of something, it's currently on hiatus, but House of Genius. Do you know House of Genius?
I'm not familiar. The name is intriguing, but
it's awesome. Yeah, I think, don't quote me, I'm on being recorded, so I'm being quoted, but I think it's international. It's definitely national. Like there's different chapters, and basically the idea is 3 entrepreneurs once a month. So once a month, everybody gets together, and it's a completely different group of people. I'm one of the volunteers. And 3 entrepreneurs come and basically kind of pitch their idea, but it's not to a room full of people who haven't identified themselves. So they just are allowed to share their first name. They don't say what they do. They don't say what title they have or what their last name is or anything. It's intended to really level the playing field, because the genius is there in the room, regardless of what your title is. And it's this collective playing off one another. But anyway, these 3 entrepreneurs come and pitch their idea. And then they ask the audience a question that they need help with in their business. They're really trying to move the needle on their startup. And everybody gets to share their advice. And again, can't say what what industry they're from or what they do for a living, but the genius that comes out of that is truly magical, and it really helps these entrepreneurs grow. And after every evening that we've done this, we go to a bar down the street afterwards and just get to say who we are and what we do and make further connections. But it's this really magical experience. So that's something I've enjoyed being a part of, and I'm looking forward to that coming back. So. Yes.
Yeah. That sounds like a just fascinating program. How about, I assume based on, I guess, the other like data points we've talked about with how many co-working spaces and what the funding landscape looks like, I'm assuming there's a bunch of events similar to the one you just described for entrepreneurs to meet each other, but also pitch their ideas. Is there like, I guess, a place or like a centralized location for people to go to learn about these upcoming events and like all the different happenings in St. Louis?
Honestly, no. I would say the closest thing is Venture Cafe, because that's really known and established here as the place for entrepreneurs. And I think it has tons of events. I mean, it's just, so I would say that's probably the closest option. Co-working spaces all have their own events as well. So where a lot of that happens, but that would be probably the number one, in my opinion, just what I've seen.
What startup would you say has been the most successful to come out of St. Louis?
Oh, that's a hard question.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I don't know. We have a lot of really successful ones. Maybe I could just talk about ones that have really blown me away. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely.
Okay. So one is Swipesum. Have you heard of Swipesum?
I don't think so. No.
It's okay. And I don't know everything about them. It's been impressive to watch their climb. They are this really cool system where basically for other startups and companies, they work for free to get them the best credit card processor for their e-commerce needs. And so, for example, if I was launching a new arm of my business, I could work with Swipesum, tell them everything about this, e-commerce side, how much, each product costs, like how we're looking to scale, how many users we want to have, whatever the thing is. They collect all that data and then they work with different credit card processors. They have tons of them in their network to find the ones that'll be the best fit for you, lowest fees, just the best package overall. Then they come back and tell you about them. And you get to pick one and move forward. They handle the entire process. They handle any claims issues. It's such a gift and it's free to the startup. So they're paid by the processors. And so it's just a really cool model. They've been growing really rapidly and getting VC funding and
wow. Okay.
So they're awesome. I'm trying to think of some that are kind of off the beaten path, but
that's very kind of off the beaten path. I wouldn't have that's not like a business model that I would just think of. I'm like, oh, that, it's unique. It's unique.
Yes.
What does the media landscape look like in the startup scene? That we find that it's important to that startup communities have storytellers within them. How good of a job does the traditional media outlets do? And then are there any emerging blogs or podcasts or anything of that sort that cover the St. Louis ecosystem?
That's a great question. So yes, I think that the Business Journal, St. Louis Business Journal, is pretty good. Again, I don't have a basis for comparison, but they seem to cover the big things happening in the business world, including startups here in St. Louis. So startups that are getting VC funding and that are growing other cities or whatever the case, or mergers and acquisitions, things like that. So I think they do a decent job. I mean, I learn a lot from reading that. Another one that's on a smaller scale is EQ, Entrepreneurial Quarterly, I think is what it stands for. Jonathan Allen's the CEO over there, and his whole model is focused on the startup world. So he churns out email newsletters that have updates on startups in St. Louis, and it's super helpful. I feel like that's a really, really great coverage. Another one a podcast that's here locally that's pretty awesome, it's probably one of my favorites, is the Entrepreneurially Thinking podcast.
Okay.
It's led by Christy Maxfield and Dr. Cheryl Watkins Moore, and they interview entrepreneurs. First, they always ask, what does entrepreneurially thinking mean to you? So the entrepreneur gets to define that concept, and then they learn about their journey and share how they've scaled their business. And it's super inspiring. So I would say those are the ones that stand out to me.
Yeah. And even just comparing how the different entrepreneurs answer that question would be interesting. Yes.
Yeah. One time we were at a conference, the Vision Conference, which I'm a part of the planning committee. It's awesome. It's a inclusivity conference for entrepreneurs. So it's the only Midwestern, it's my understanding, it's the only conference in the Midwest that focuses on inclusion in the entrepreneur space. So for women, minority business owners, people of color, immigrants, veterans, it's awesome. But anyway, at that event, they had their podcast producer with a microphone going around table to table and saying, what does entrepreneurially thinking mean to you? And they got a ton of different, answers to that question. It was fun. So
yes. Yeah. What was the name of that event that you just touched on?
The Vision Conference.
The Vision Conference. Yes. Yeah. That's kind of been an ongoing theme that we really tried to highlight of how to create a community that's inclusive yet diverse and and includes more than just the traditional white tech startup bros.
Yeah, exactly. To that point, it's interesting. So St. Louis has been named the #1 startup for women entrepreneurs. So number one city, I'm sorry, for women entrepreneurs in the country. We have apparently the highest per capita women founders in the country, which is pretty cool. So, I mean, just from that aspect, we're working hard on that and it's continuing to grow. So
why St. Louis?
I have no idea. That's a good question. I think it has to do with some of the things we're talking about, like access to funding, access to resources, access to people to help you grow. And we are affectionately called the Silicon Prairie. So there's just, there's a big contingent of startups here. I think that it's just a great place to start a business. So.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So Katie, last question for you. If I were to move to St. Louis tomorrow and wanted to start a business, what's the very first thing I should do?
That's a great question. Okay, I'm biased, but I say join a co-working space because it doesn't have to be ours. It can be wherever you find your people. I think that if you have that network in St. Louis, and that's what co-working spaces do best, is that they hand you a network of people that are, can help you grow, that are really invested in your success. That's the key to this. And having that network can help you be so successful in all areas of your business. So I always say my #1 piece of advice is to never do it alone. Build your tribe, build your community around you that can help you grow and be successful and that you can give back to as well. So I think co-working spaces are where it's at for that.
Yes. Yeah. Very good advice, Katie. Thank you for giving us the rundown on all things St. Louis. And thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Nick. This is super fun. Appreciate it.
Now that we've learned about an ecosystem from the person building it, I'm going to link back up with Caitlin to clarify some jargon and take a deeper dive into this community.
Hey Nick, how is it going? How was your interview with Katie?
It was great to connect with Katie, and probably the thing that and we were kind of talking about this beforehand of just like the network effects that are taking place for us, that we connected with Katie because I think, Caitlin, you interviewed someone else in St. Louis who said you need to interview Katie. So that's how we got her name. And then she's a connection that I definitely just enjoyed spending time with her. Great person. And it was also great. I don't know much about St. Louis, as was kind of picked up in the interview. So it was great to, just learn more about that community and what's going on there. And it is probably one of the most robust ecosystems of all the places we've covered.
Yes, I am in the same boat of thinking that as well. I used to know it for the St. Louis City Museum, which I will plug that so hard. It is so fantastic. It's like a playground for kids and adults. And, maybe it is just for kids, but I love it so much. I don't care.
Yes. I, of course, would like to hit up the arch. Do the whole little sketchy elevator to the top. I've never done it, and I think that is just something that's kind of like going to Mount Rushmore or seeing the Statue of Liberty, just something that I feel like I should do. So
I have been there. List. It's and then sometimes it pauses, and you're like, oh my gosh, are we going to have to take the stairs? Oh, wow. Yeah. St. Louis, once pandemic slows down, I definitely recommend you go check it out. So plugging St. Louis again, that's how we build ecosystems, of course. So during your interview or afterwards, did you have to look anything up?
Not really. Katie, I wouldn't say is like a textbook ecosystem builder. She's more of an entrepreneur. She started that co-working space that has been very successful, and she's really built a community around that. But she is not like a academic like some of the other people we've talked to. So it was very just kind of straightforward.
Right on. So, before we close out, do you have any final thoughts that you wanted to share?
None that really come up. Besides, I guess Katie mentioned the conference that she went to, and I'm just excited for live events and conferences and like that aspect. And it's close. I'm now fully vaccinated. So if you have not been vaccinated yet, I would strongly recommend getting vaccinated so we can do things like go to live shows, attend conferences, meet people in person, all of that. But that is it. Caitlin, do you want to read us out?
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Ecosystem Builder Podcast, which is a product of mug.news and hosted by Nick Kastner and Caitlin Clays. If you have any questions about today's episode, connect with us on Twitter at Nick Kastner, at Clays Creates, or at Mug News Official. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review and share with your friends. We release episodes every Wednesday morning, so make sure to follow so you don't miss a beat.